Why are my favourite shoes so worn out? Probably because I spend 80% of the time wearing just 20% of my shoes. The Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto concluded in 1896 that there is an imbalance between causes and results, inputs and outputs, and effect and reward. In one of his studies, he established that 80% of Italy's wealth was owned by just 20% of its population. There's some remarkable consistency here, and interestingly, a study in 1989 showed that 82.7% of the world's GDP was in the hands of just 20% of the population. Now you might know this as the 80-20 rule or even Pareto's principle. Now if Pareto was still around today, he would see that the principle is still alive and well. Just look around, it's everywhere. We spend 80% of the time talking to just 20% of the people in our phone book. We spend 80% of the time walking on just 20% of our carpets. And 80% of factory quality problems come from just 20% of the workforce. And let's not forget that 80% of many businesses' revenue comes from just 20% of their customer base. The key accounts. In many ways, this is why key account management is all the more important in today's world. The more business from fewer customers trend is showing no sign of slowing down. In fact, with the Pareto principle being exponential, when we apply it again, we often find that a massive 64% of a company's revenue comes from just 4% of its customer base. That's huge. Customers at the smaller end are now often managed on a transactional model via the telephone or technology. The middle ground is disappearing, along with the legions of field-based sales executives that used to manage them. And the key accounts at the top are now looking for a consultative partnership that will really add value and transform their business. The traditional gaps that used to exist between things like products, packaging, and pricing have narrowed, and now it's much easier for competitors to copy what you're doing. Today, in the eyes of the customer, everyone is selling the same sort of thing, but the one thing that simply cannot be copied is your people and the way they build relationships and interact with your customers. For many companies today, relationship management and the customer experience is the only differentiator. It's become the home of the competitive advantage. So if all this resonates with you and your business, where do you start? Let's think about key account management like that three-legged stool, made up of systems, strategies, and skills. As the analogy suggests, without one of these working effectively, the whole thing could fall over. Here are some quick questions that you could be asking yourself to ensure that you've got all bases covered. Do you have a consistent approach to managing the key accounts across your business? If the account manager that looks after your most important client left the business today, would there be a robust CAM plan to hand over to the new guy? And what KPIs do you have in place to monitor the strength of the relationship with your most important customers? Do you have a clear and shared vision of what the next 12 to 18 months looks like for your key clients? What are your primary objectives and goals for each of them? And what part will your key accounts play in the overall strategy of the business this year? What are the strengths of your key account managers and what blind spots do you feel need addressing? How good are your people at some of the fundamental skills in selling? And do you have the right people in the right roles? By just spending 20% of your diary thinking about the bigger picture in your business, you could be generating 80% return.